All right. So tonight we're going to be reading about Revelation 13. It's about these two I'm just kidding. But like I said, this is not written to confuse us. It's written to reveal something to us. It's written to give hope and strength to believers, no matter what those believers are going through, no matter when those believers lived or are living or will live. And the hope that I'm a little out of breath from jogging 20 feet. The hope that helps us to see that no matter what, no matter how powerful evil might seem, Jesus has the ultimate victory. And that's what this book is about. So as we get into it tonight, we're going to, instead of focusing on who's this beast and what does this beast represent, who is this, what is the mark, and all these questions we have, we should be more focusing on what does God want me to learn about faithfulness, or what does God want me to learn about perseverance in a world that actively opposes God. So before we dive into chapter 13, just to recap what happened in chapter 12, we studied the last couple weeks. It kind of provides this background of a spiritual war that's been going on kind of behind the scenes. So chapter 12 begins with this vision of a woman that's clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. We talked about how that represented Israel, and that was where the Messiah was born. And then there was this great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns that stood before her, ready to devour her child as soon as that child was going to be born. The dragon is actually identified in chapter 12 as that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the world. And the woman gives birth to that male child who will rule all the nations with a rod of iron, which is a prophetic description of Jesus. And he's immediately caught up to God and to his throne, representing his ascension to heaven. And the dragon is cast out of heaven to the earth, and he's defeated in his attempt to stop Jesus. Remember, he stood before the woman before she gave birth because he wanted to devour Jesus. He doesn't want Jesus to come. He doesn't want that plan to work. Unfortunately for him, Jesus came and he lived and he died and was buried and was resurrected, and he provides salvation. The devil doesn't like that. So after the devil's cast out, the dragon persecutes the woman. But we read in chapter 12 that she's given 2 wings of the great eagle to flee into the wilderness, and she's protected for this period of time. And that period of time is 1,260 days, or 42 weeks, or 3.5 years, or a time times and half a time. And that also fulfills earlier prophecy that talks about the woman in the wilderness for that length of time. So, and that right there is hope in itself, and not only the provision of God, but it also shows us that even though Satan is defeated and cast down, he still has power to cause trouble and specifically target God's people on earth, but at the same time, his time is short. He only has that limited amount of time. And then, like I said, chapter 12 ends with Satan, the dragon, being filled with this anger and this fury and this rage, and it says he's going off to make war with the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So that's where we left off the last couple weeks. So as we begin Revelation 13 tonight, we have to keep in mind what's going on behind the scenes, that spiritual warfare, and who is behind the scenes. The beasts that we're going to read about tonight are not operating independently. They're not acting of their own free will, essentially. They are tools of the dragon, of Satan himself, in this final desperate war against God's people. In other words, chapter 12 gives us insight as to who the instigator is for all this stuff, and then chapter 13 shows us the instruments that he's using to wage war with God's people and wage his final stand against God's people. So let's go ahead and get right into it tonight. Got a lot of interesting things to tackle tonight. Revelation chapter 13, starting with the first 4 verses. It says, "And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore, and then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 crowns, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been fatally wounded, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole of the earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshipped the dragon because he gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast and who is able to wage war with him?" So John sees this beast rise up out of the sea. It has 10 horns, 7 heads, and on its heads are blasphemous names. What's interesting is it says it looks like a leopard with feet like a bear, mouth like a lion, and the dragon gives this beast its power, its throne, its authority on earth. One of its heads appears to be fatally wounded, and then that wound is healed, and the whole world is amazed, and they follow after the beast, and they worship the dragon and the beast. So what does all that mean? It's kind of crazy symbolism there. So first of all, a beast coming up out of the sea. So the sea in biblical prophecy typically represents nations, or it can represent chaos. A lot of times people look at it as restless nations or chaotic nations. So Daniel actually described 4 beasts in his vision in Daniel chapter 7. And they represented Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and the Roman Empire. Now, the book of Isaiah also gives us some insight on this too. Isaiah 53 says, "The wicked are like the tossing sea, for it cannot be quiet, and the waters toss up refuse and mud." So given these biblical references, we can kind of infer a little bit more information as to what this is painting a picture of. So this first beast coming up out of the sea points to be rising up out of some sort of turmoil of nations, some sort of political conflict, some sort of human political national conflict is where this stuff is rising up from. Not to mention the description of the beast looks really similar to those beasts that we read about back in Daniel chapter 7. It says the first beast the first beast in Daniel chapter 7 was a lion with eagle's wings that represented Babylon. The second was a bear that symbolized Medo-Persia. The third was a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads that represented Greece. And the fourth beast was this terrifying and dreadful creature with iron teeth, and that's interpreted as the Roman Empire. But if you look at the way these verses here describe it, it says, "The beast I saw was like a leopard." And like I said, the third kingdom in Daniel's vision was a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. Now, back in that study, we talked about how that represented Greece under Alexander the Great. He was known for he was able to conquer really quickly, and he had really quick conquests, and he was really cruel, and then his empire wound up being split up to 4 different leaders after that. That's what the 4 heads were, but the wings represented that swiftness. The second kingdom in Daniel's vision was that bear, Medo-Persia, known for its crushing power, and it had the 3 ribs in its mouth. Then the first kingdom in Daniel's vision was that lion that represented Babylon, known for strength and majesty. Now, here in Revelation, John says that the beast he saw had 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 crowns, and on his heads were blasphemous names. Once again, there's more symbolism that links back to Daniel chapter 7. So like I said, that fourth kingdom in Daniel 7, which is that terrifying, powerful empire, that also had 10 horns. And the 10 horns in Daniel represented 10 kings. Here, it's probable to represent 10 kings or 10 kingdoms that will give their power to that beast. Now it says that it has blasphemous names on its heads. So the heads represent the centers of power, and the names show the beast's authority, because the heads represent power. So that beast's authority is fundamentally opposed to God. It has blasphemous names on the heads that represent power. In other words, it claims for itself the titles and the honor that only should belong to God, which is blasphemous in itself. And John mentions the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority, which means that first beast's authority is not its own. Its authority is being delegated to it by Satan. And then he says that he saw one of the heads that's been as if it had been fatally wounded, and then his fatal wound was healed. And what that's looked at is kind of a satanic parody of the resurrection, of Jesus' resurrection. The beast appears to die and then come back to life, stunning the world, and the world's in awe of it. It's a false resurrection. It's meant to deceive the nations. It's deception. And evidently it worked, but based off of this scripture, it makes people think that this beast is invincible and divine and godly. And that false resurrection causes the world to want to worship it. It's something amazing, something we can't explain, something witnessed. John writes that the whole world was amazed and followed after the beast, and they worshiped the dragon because he gave the authority to the beast. So, kind of by proxy, they're worshiping Satan because Satan's the one that gave power to this beast. The world is captivated by this stuff. They're captivated by this deceptive display of power and this false resurrection. And we can look at this as a warning that the world is really easily swayed by this kind of stuff. But anything that's powerful and seemingly miraculous, anybody that's a really charismatic figure, if they'll follow after that, even if that person is blasphemous and evil. Even if Christians can see that and say, can't you see this? They'll be like, well, no, look how awesome he is. People get blinded by that stuff. And it's not really that far-fetched, too. It's not even really uncommon. What's always fascinated me, a lot of people watch a lot of serial killer documentaries and different stuff because they're fascinated about what goes into making a serial killer. For me, cult stuff is interesting because how can somebody's charisma or just being this like good speaker lead people to abandon their families and their lives and give up everything and do this crazy stuff like Jim Jones and all these other cult things? And we've seen that throughout history, how these charismatic leaders have power and get power just by appealing to the fears of people or even the desires of people, or even if they just come off in a charismatic way. They can manipulate people really easily. Even if they have destructive intentions, people will give in to them. And that blows my mind. So what I'm saying is that what we're reading about here is not that far-fetched. If people saw somebody die and get resurrected, a lot of people are going to follow that, especially a lot of people that don't know their word and that might claim to be Christians. They know that resurrection is part of Christianity. They see this, this must be Jesus come back. But it's like, you got to read your word. You need to understand what this means. The Bible tells us exactly what's going to happen. So that beast represents kind of the ultimate example of that kind of person. A leader that appears to have, the solution to the world's problems. And all you got to do is give him total loyalty. And people will give him that loyalty, even if the leader is blasphemous and evil. People don't care. And the healed wound there shows that Satan loves to create counterfeits of God's work. He loves to manipulate. He's the deceiver. His name means to deceive. Just as Jesus' resurrection is the cornerstone of the Christian faith, the beast's false resurrection will become the cornerstone of his false world religion. And we're going to get into that a little bit more in a second. But it's a powerful reminder to test things. The Bible says to test all things. And don't be easily impressed by worldly power or false miracles. So let's keep going, verses 5 to 10. It says, a mouth was given to him speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months, there's that number again, was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All who live on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name who has not been written since the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slaughtered. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. So it says the beast is given a mouth to speak arrogant words and blasphemies, and he's given the authority to act for 42 months. And for those 42 months, for that 3.5-year period, it blasphemes God, and it blasphemes his name, and it blasphemes his tabernacle and those that dwell in heaven. It makes war with the saints, and is given power over every tribe, language, people, and nation. And it says all who live on the earth will worship it, except for those that have their names written in the Lamb's book of life, the book of life of the Lamb. I like the way the New American Standard words it. But it ends there with encouragement to be patient, to persevere, to have faith, even in the midst of that kind of ultimate persecution. That's kind of the worst of the worst is what Christians at that time will be going through. Once again, going back to Daniel chapter 7 again, the arrogant words and the blasphemies sound really similar to that little horn back in Daniel chapter 7. In that chapter, it says that he will speak against the Most High, and he will wear down the saints of the Highest One, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, which is messing with religion, and they will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time, which is 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 years. That little horn spoke against God. And the beast's speech, it isn't just offensive here, it's a direct attack on the character and the authority of God. Think about now, when people go through a tough time, a lot of people right away go, why is God punishing me? Oh, why? If God was such a loving God, why would he let this happen? A lot of people turn and blame God for their problems really quickly. Imagine when most of the world is devastated and everything is horrible, how difficult it's going to be. And then at the same time, you got this guy that's performing miracles, blaspheming the one true God. It's going to be really difficult for people on the earth at that time. Directly attacking the character and the authority of God. And again, what you might have noticed, the 42 months, 3.5 years, a time times half a time. But the fact that that keeps coming up, I actually love that, because that means something huge. That means that beast's reign is not eternal. He loses, and it's only 3.5 years. And it has a divinely appointed end to his reign and his power and his blasphemies and his lies. 3.5 years. I love that it keeps coming up. Because, the devil knows what this book says. I just think it's interesting that it's like 3.5 years, buddy. 42 months. 1,260 days. Let me say it 4 different times for you so you know exactly how much time you got. Anyway, I love it. But authority was given to him over every tribe, people, language, and nation. That's talking about universal global dominion over what's left of the world there. The beast's influence is worldwide, which points to this kind of all-encompassing nature of that final evil system. It's not just an isolated thing, okay, the devil's just going to be right here. He's got his finger down on the entire world. And the power and the authority that was given to him means that he could essentially do whatever he wants. But it also says, all who live on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written since the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slaughtered. There's a distinction between 2 different groups of people here. You have the world that will worship the beast, and then you have the saints who will not worship the beast. Their salvation, their identity, and their destiny is not determined by that beast or his power or his blasphemies. Their security only comes through Jesus' promise, through Jesus' salvation. And it says, if anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. Now, what that's talking about, that's not talking about revenge. It's not talking about vengeance. It's not talking about fighting back with physical weapons. It's a call to faithful endurance is what that is. Persevere. The saints are called to trust in God's sovereignty, even in the face of horrible suffering and becoming martyrs and being killed. They're not supposed to resist with violence. They're supposed to patiently endure it and trust and know that God is going to care for his own in his time. So there's some scholars, the historicists, that look back on Revelation and try to apply it to history. They see this beast as a representation of the Roman Empire. And they can also see it as the papacy, the popalship, I don't know what to call it, the papacy, and other historical powers that persecuted the church. But on the other side of it, futurists believe that this beast refers to a specific future political leader and empire that will rise to power in the end times. And given what we've read and given what we've seen, that seems to be the most plausible. this beast from the sea, is typically seen as the primary figure of the Antichrist. It's kind of a 2-for-1. It's both a political power and the Antichrist kind of baked into one. The Antichrist is not just a person against Christ, but it's a person that represents or that presents himself in the place of Christ. Sorry, I skipped a paragraph, I think. It's worth noting that the beast's power over every tribe, people, language, and nation, and the link to the end times and other prophetic passages point to what's being fulfilled in the future. So the futurist point of view seems to be the most plausible, it makes the most sense, and it's kind of the most widely accepted. But like I said, the beast from the sea is that kind of primary figure of the Antichrist. And a lot of times when we picture the Antichrist, we think of the Antichrist, somebody that's against Christ. But it's like the negative version of Christ. You can look at it that way. He presents himself in the place of Christ as a counterfeit with completely opposite characteristics. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. But this beast from the sea with the 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 crowns, it represents these Gentile nations that come up out of some sort of turmoil in some sort of worldly political influence, and they're become empowered by Satan. And to put it more simply, the beast is understood to symbolize both a kingdom or a kind of confederation of nations and the individual Antichrist that's going to rule that kingdom. So it's kind of a package deal. The dragon, who is Satan, gives that beast and the Antichrist his power, throne, and authority. And like I said, one of the beast's heads, it looks like he suffers a fatal wound, but then he's somehow miraculously healed. And some people interpret that to symbolize a defeated nation under the Antichrist, but it's more commonly understood as the Antichrist experiencing this false resurrection, this counterfeit resurrection, to imitate Christ, to get people to follow and think that he's this miraculous, awesome guy. And then, like I said, people on earth are going to be astonished by it, and they're going to worship the beast. And the beast is given authority to speak arrogance and speak blasphemous things for that 3.5-year period and blaspheme God, his name, and all those in heaven. And then, like I said, it's allowed to wage war against those tribulation saints. And it even says that they'll overcome them, which leads to them becoming martyrs. But those with their name written in the book of life of the Lamb, or the Lamb's book of life, they're not going to worship the beast. They're going to be cared for. And the Antichrist is represented as the man of sin. I don't know if you've heard that before, where the Antichrist is looked at as the man of sin and a beast, while Jesus is the sinless man and the Lamb. And like I said, the term Antichrist makes you think anti-Christ, anti-Jesus, but it's more like a completely opposing nature of Jesus' nature. They're opposing natures to each other. And instead of just being against each other, the Antichrist represents a direct rejection of everything that Jesus stands for. So I don't know if I'm explaining that right. Because typically you hear Antichrist, they're just like, oh, he doesn't like Jesus. But no, anti as in opposite. Opposing natures rather than just being against each other. So again, the common understanding among biblical scholars and theologians is that first beast represents both a political power, whether it's a confederation of nations or multiple nations or even one big powerful nation that was an amalgamation of some smaller nations, but it's a political power and a person. And it represents this system of political power that would become this empire, this kingdom, and it's, again, ultimately led by the Antichrist. But, like I said in the beginning, there's 2 beasts that we're going to talk about. So that beast is not complete without a partner. So let's get into John's vision of the second beast, and we'll see how they work together to continue to deceive the world. We saw the beast from the sea. Now let's see the beast from the earth. Revelation 13, 11 through 15. It says, "Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and it had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who live on it worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of the sky to the earth in the presence of people. And he deceives those who live on earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who live on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause all who do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So more crazy symbolism there. John sees this second beast, this time coming up out of the earth instead of the sea. It says it has 2 horns like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. And it exercises all this authority of the first beast, and it makes the world want to worship that first beast. It performs great signs. It even makes fire rain down from the sky. The first beast was from the sea, and like I said, the sea of nations, Gentile nations, but this one is coming up from the earth, and some people look at that as representing some sort of religious or spiritual power. It's the kind of base of the beast's kingdom. So this is looked at as a prophet-like figure, this second beast, that's going to have its own power base and legitimacy on earth. So something with some sort of a religious following or spiritual following. It says it has 2 horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. That right there is a picture of deception. A lamb is a symbol of innocence and purity. And a lot of times when we hear lamb, we jump straight to Jesus. That's typically what we do. This beast looks like a Christ figure. It looks like a Christ figure, but in other words, it appears to be gentle and harmless and welcoming. But notice it says it speaks like a dragon. It looks like a lamb. You ever hear wolf in sheep's clothing? It's essentially what this is talking about. It speaks like a dragon. The source of its message that it's giving out is like a dragon. The dragon is Satan. The beast is a false prophet. This is a deceiver. This is a false prophet. He exercises all the authority of that first beast in his presence, and he acts as almost like a public relations kind of arm or religious minister for that first beast. His entire purpose is to direct worship away from God and direct that worship towards the Antichrist. Satan, the dragon, empowers that political leader, that first beast, that political power and the Antichrist, and Satan, the dragon, empowers this religious leader. And the second beast points to that political power and the Antichrist. So you can see they're all working in tandem with each other, all 3 of them. Some people call this the mockery of the Holy Trinity, because you have Satan, you have the political power and the Antichrist, and you have this false prophet. It says that he can even make fire come down from the sky in the presence of people. That's another false miracle. It's a kind of mockery of the prophet Elijah. In 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah called for fire to come down from heaven to prove that the God of Israel was the one true God. Now this guy's coming and he's doing the same thing. He's making a mockery of it. This false prophet will use these kinds of miracles to try to prove his false claims and try to deceive the world. The second beast reminds us that false teaching can come from sources that might seem good and might seem holy. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's going to make it sound good. It says that they have horns like a lamb, which is why we have to be vigilant and discern. We have to be able to discern things. And again, like Scripture says, examine the Word. We have to judge every message not by the person giving it, not by charisma, not by popularity even, but by its faithfulness to the Word of God. And it's a very big deal now, especially with YouTube and social media and stuff, and all these clips that you see. There's one channel that I follow that I really like and I respected because he made a good point about worship music and about being careful about the type of worship music you select, whether or not it's biblical or not. And I liked that. And then he went into this tangent on something that I completely disagree with, and he was preaching it as gospel, and it really made me begin, I was shook up a little bit because I watched several of his videos like, oh, I like what this guy's saying. And then all of a sudden, I was like, whoa, hold on. That's not what God's word says. Again, we don't do a super good job of this even now. I mean, you could go on TikTok, you see something like, oh, that sounds good. That looks good. There's stuff now called progressive Christianity and the prosperity gospel, and they're growing more and more popular because they sound good. They sound pretty good. But they're examples of what Paul warned about in 2 Timothy. He said, for the time will come when they will not tolerate sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance with their own desires. And they will turn their ears away from the truth and will turn aside to myths. It's exactly what's going on. I mean, it's been going on for forever, but right now there's a lot of it going on, and it's spreading really quickly. So that's what this false prophet is doing. This false prophet is essentially promoting this new worldwide religion, and he's persuading people to worship the Antichrist. Look at that guy. He came back from the dead. He's the anti-Billy Graham in a way. This beast is deceiving people, and he's telling them, make an image of that beast. Make a false idol. And he performs these great signs like rain and fire from the sky, and he's deceiving people. He instructs them to create that first image. It says that he'll create this statue, this image of the Antichrist, and then he'll miraculously bring it to life somehow and then actually get it to speak. All of that is enforcing worship of the Antichrist. And I use the word enforce on purpose because it's enforcing religion. It said that the image would cause anybody who refuses to bow down to be executed. They are enforcing religion under penalty of death. And since we know that this false religion is permeating the world, those that will remain faithful to God, they're going to be targeted. They're going to be sought after. They're going to be killed for their refusal to worship this false idol. And it continues, verses 13 to 18, it says, he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the slaves, to be given a mark on their head. A mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, and he decrees that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man. His number is 666. So not only does this false prophet enforce religion, but he also forces all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And without this mark, nobody can buy or sell. And the mark is the name of the beast or the number of its name, which is 666. The mark of the beast is a really central action of this second beast because it forces a choice. The mark is a sign of allegiance to that beast, a public declaration of worship. Now, the fact that it says a mark on their right hands and on their foreheads is relevant. Those locations are relevant. So look at Deuteronomy chapter 6. So starting with verse 4, I believe, and then leading into verse 8, it says, hear Israel, like hear Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart, and you shall repeat them diligently to your sons, and speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. You shall also tie them as a sign to your hand, and they shall be as frontlets on your forehead. That is extremely relevant. The mark of the beast is a satanic perversion of what this is talking about in Deuteronomy. The law, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. The mark of the beast is a choice to put your obedience and your thoughts and your life under the control of the beast rather than under the control of God. The mark is a counterfeit of the spiritual seal that is received by the believer. The mark is a symbol of loyalty to the Antichrist. Now it's interesting because before we go deeper into this, the modern technology can come into play here. And we've already talked about how back in the two witnesses during their death, it says it would be seen by the entire world. And a lot of people think about things like social media or live streaming, because back when this was written, how could the entire world see an event right here? Now, it's all the time. Something goes viral, everybody can see it. In the last verses, it's talking about this image of the beast being created. Going back a few verses, it says that the image was being made to speak. Some people think that could be talking about animatronics, because some animatronics do look pretty lifelike. But recently, there's been another technological advancement that's been blowing up recently, something that I actually use a lot. Something called AI. AI could potentially be used to make an image of the beast appear to come to life. I don't know if you've seen some of these AI videos. Some of them look really realistic. There's one, it's Bigfoot. And he like goes and does crazy stuff, but Bigfoot looks pretty real, and he's like recording himself. But I mean, anyway, some of them are made of specific people. I don't know if you've seen, they make them look real. It makes it look, and they even sound real. They make videos of like Tom Hanks. It looks like Tom Hanks, it sounds like Tom Hanks, and it has nothing to do with Tom Hanks. It was a computer that did it. They can mimic voices, they can mimic mannerisms. And not to mention here, technology like barcodes, credit cards. It could be a precursor to a system of control that a lot of people look at the mark of the beast. I don't know if you know this, but a few years ago when there was a caravan of Canadian truck drivers, and they were gonna come and drive, I think they're gonna like come across the North American border or something like that. But while they were doing that, the government didn't like it. They didn't like their message. They literally turned off the truck driver's money. They just went into their bank and turned it off. Online banking, digital everything. That's where we're at right now. How many of you has cash on you? 2 people, 3, 4. How much though? My wife is like, she's like, we need to pull all our cash out. I'm like, we pay all our bills with now we pay it with your thumbprint, you know? You don't even, it's automatic now. And again, of course, these are theories. We don't know exactly how it's going to look. But in these verses, it says that he decrees that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one that has the mark. But so you can see the economic control about this. This is about economic control of this beast's systems. And that's an ultimate expression of his power. If you control people's money, money is everything. There's a lot of people that are like, why do I have to give God my money? So many people are against tithing. It's like, they're so close-minded. But when you take somebody's money, when you mess with somebody's money, for some reason that is so controlling and powerful. Have you guys ever, a couple of years ago, Wells Fargo had something where they had a glitch and you couldn't access it or something. You couldn't see your money. It like all disappeared. And they're like, oh, we're working on it. It was panic-inducing. I don't know, I check my bank account every day to know that I can afford lunch. But you can see how powerful that control is. Economic control is the ultimate expression of this beast's power. It forces you to either compromise your faith or starve. It's huge. It's a tool to force allegiance. If you don't have the mark, you're excluded from that society and you can't function in that world. It's a very real threat to the physical lives of the saints, and it highlights, again, the cost of faithfulness. Now, the number of the beast. We know that it's 666, but it's been a subject of countless theories. What does that really mean? Now, it's worth mentioning that in ancient times, letters had numerical values to them, and there's this common theory, I forget what it's called, it starts with a G, but it's a common theory that the early church fathers looked at, and they took the name Nero Caesar, and when they transliterated it into Hebrew letters, and then they assigned numerical values to it, it added up to 666. So they're like, oh, it's Nero Caesar. So they theorized that the mark of the beast was the symbol of the Roman Empire because of the Christian persecution under Caesar Nero. The problem is that That interpretation is, number one, it's not universally accepted. Not a lot of people believe that, but there's issues in the spelling of Nero's name. They can't even really prove it depending on how it's spelled. But another interpretation, and this is the main one here, is it's a representation of humanity falling short of God's perfect number, which is 7. Number 7 in the Bible represents perfection and completion. We've talked about that before. The number 6 represents incompletion. It represents falling short. So 666 is the ultimate kind of triple imperfection, or the ultimate failure to be divine. It's a number that means the absolute imperfection and incompleteness of the beast, no matter how much earthly power that beast has, no matter how much power it has, how devastating it can be, or whatever it is, it will always be imperfect and incomplete in comparison to God. And that number has become so iconic in our culture that we see it in movies and music and art all the time, and there's this kind of cultural fascination about it. There was one time I went to Little Caesars, and I ordered food, and it came out to $6.66. And the girl working there was like, "Can you buy something else?" She didn't even want to finish ringing me up. I was like, "Then give me a sauce then." She's like, "I'm sorry, I just couldn't." There's this cultural, it's cultural fascination. But it's a testament to the power of that symbol, of that number. But it's crucial to remember the theological meaning behind it. It's not just a spooky number, it's a symbol of the ultimate godlessness and human failure. It's a reminder of the incompleteness and imperfection of the beast, a constant reminder that only Jesus is perfect, only Jesus is complete, and another constant reminder that the beast, the devil, the dragon, is always destined to lose. So this chapter is a pretty serious warning, but it's also, once again, a powerful source of encouragement for believers. And it's funny because, again, this book is looked at as being so dark and scary and whatever else, but every time we go through a chapter, you see hope, you see victory, you see good constantly. It uncovers Satan's final plan to try to deceive the world by using these two figures, the political leader and the religious leader here, and to create this system that demands worship and it demands loyalty, and they persecute and kill anybody that refuses. Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet are all working together to try to control people through everything from false miracles to an economic system where you can't buy or sell without that special mark, without giving your loyalty to the beast. But even with all that dark and evil stuff going on, they cannot stifle hope. There are still people that believe. There are still people that refuse, and they patiently persevere. We continue to see hope no matter what the devil tries to do. No matter what. For those who put their faith in Jesus, our names are written in the Lamb's book of life. And again, our job is not to fight with worldly weapons, but to remain patient and remain faithful and trust God. The power of the beast is limited. The power of the beast is temporary. It'll only last for 42 months. And that's the devil's last stand, is to fight as hard as he can for 3.5 years. And then as we move from chapter 13 to chapter 14, we get to see that shift. We get to see the shift from the enemy's plan here to God's response. Chapter 13 shows the rise of evil. Chapter 14 reveals God's answer to it. God's people will be victorious, and God's justice is coming soon. And we'll get into that next week. It's Revelation chapter 13. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word, and thank you so much just for constantly revealing your nature to us, God. You're such a loving Father. You're such a caring, awesome God. It breaks my heart that people depict you as this wrathful, vengeful, angry God when I see this loving Father that genuinely cares about his children and provides way out after way out after way out and chance after chance. You are long-suffering. You are patient with us, God, as we continue to fail. God, I always say that we're like toddlers, we're like babies. And I picture us trying to get up and walk and run, but we keep stumbling and falling, and we can't get it right. And every time you just say, it's okay, try again. I'm right here. You've got your hand reached out for us. God, you're absolutely amazing. And even in the end, God, when you're exacting your judgments, when you're finally at that point where you said, okay, enough's enough, and I need to judge the world so that victory will be mine, and so we don't have to deal with this stuff anymore. Even at that point, your love just permeates this entire book. It's not a book about some scary apocalyptic future. It's a book about your love coming to fruition in this, your plan being unfolded properly, God, and the final end of your plan, the final victory. Oftentimes we get all the way to Jesus and to salvation and we stop, but there's still more to your plan. We get to look forward to that. This book is your promise. It's your word. We've seen throughout this entire book, throughout the entirety of human history, that you're a promise-keeping God. You keep your word, and what you say is going to happen is going to happen, which means we could take everything in this book to the bank, which means we know that the devil's going to lose and that you are victorious and that we are on the right side. So God, as we wait for that day, continue to move in us and push us, God, and convict us and help us to walk more diligently, God. Help us to be more vulnerable in your presence. Help us to be more honest with you. Let go of the things that we're scared to let go of and reflect your light, God. We don't always have the answers. We don't always know what you're doing. We don't always know when you're going to do it. For now, we see in a mirror dimly. But we know, God, that you work all things together for good. So we cling to that truth, and we cling to the hope that you give us in salvation. And God, again, thank you so much just for the opportunity to study your word together and see that there's hope no matter how dark this world gets. We love you, God, and we trust you. It's in your Son's name. Amen.